Thanks so much for coming. Thanks to Golan and Tom and the Studio for Creative Inquiry for hosting this talk. And thanks to Jason for deciding that working with all of my classes today and that deciding to do this as well seemed like a good idea at the time. I hope it continues to be a good idea in an hour. So I'm really excited to introduce this is so tall. Interventionist, provocateur, prankster, and organizer Jason Eppink. In addition to his role as the Curator of Digital Media at the Museum of the Moving Image in New York City, he has an impressive body of creative work spanning interventions in public space, video works, tactical media, and collaborative projects with collectives, artists, designers, and people who walk for very long distances. I've learned a lot personally from working with Jason and admire his utopian aims, often operating in non-art contexts, bringing visibility to questions about failures of public infrastructure, questioning American art's funding models, playfully subverting surveillance, and thinking about why art is often viewed as inherently more valuable than parties. I have no idea which of his projects in his appropriately, though maybe ironically named, catalog of creative triumphs listed on his website that he'll talk about today, but nonetheless, I'm sure it will give us all something to think and talk about. His work has been presented at legitimized contexts like the Venice Architectural Biennale, and even underground contexts like abandoned subway stations in New York City, and his projects have been written about in the New York Times and a million other places that are equally or more impressive. Good Magazine called him one of the top 100 most important, exciting, and innovative people making our world better and changing the way we live. And that's a pretty big accolade and probably hard to live up to. So anyway, I could read for an hour more nice things that have been written about him or places that his work has been showed, but I'll let him do what he's here to do. So thank you so much. Let's give a warm welcome to Jason Eppink.
Thanks, Angela, for inviting me. Thanks, Golan, for having me. Thanks, everyone, for coming. That was a really humbling bio. Can you please update my Wikipedia page? That would be great. Yeah, so you thanks for committing to this really wordy thing. But actually, this is like just another way to word it, I think, and what I'm interested in talking about. So these are sort of four values that I hold in the things that I do, both sort of professionally at the museum and personally with sort of my uninvited things that I do, which is sort of free as in beer and speech, participatory, that everyone's involved, surprise, and of course sort of populism. And I'm just going to basically just talk about some of my stuff and sort of frame it in some of the ways I'm thinking about. And yeah, so I'm at the Museum of the Moving Image, the Curator of Digital Media. I think that those of us here probably, like me, don't even really know what that means. I think sort of digital media is a sort of redundant term, especially sort of in the moving image. So it's really interesting to think about that. So the museum, briefly, is dedicated to cinema, television, video games, digital art. You might recognize Flux by Golan up there. There's another piece, DVD Dead Drop by Aaron Bartol, who's probably also you're familiar with. And increasingly under my stead, remix, animated GIFs and web cultures, and of course, raging art parties. So that's sort of what I do at the museum. And then when I don't do that, I sort of frame what I do as urban alchemy, mischief. This is so I'm involved with an organization called Flux Factory, and we are the avian flu, and we're entering the Iditarod, which is a shopping cart race in Brooklyn every January, like a 5-mile shopping cart race. So two things that I sort of want to sort of frame this by. I'm always sort of in this interesting tension between sort of curator and creator. So I think in the sort of latter, or the former, like the curator is sort of thinking about how creativity affects culture, whereas the creator is sort of often thinking about how creativity is affecting oneself, or when we think about these sorts of things, that's sort of how we think about the role of creativity. Or another sort of way to make that delineation is that a curator is thinking more about the product, where the creator is maybe thinking more about the process. And like sort of the ways these sort of manifest is curators thinking maybe about milestones, exemplars, era-defining moments, Whereas a creator, the things that sort of come out of sort of the focus on process and the creators, maybe art therapy, murals by children, community theater. So I've always been, it's this interesting tension of trying to figure out where those collide, where those overlap. So that'll come up a bit. And then I also just want to frame sort of my understanding of how like creativity works. I think art is important and interesting, but I think it's part of a much larger thing. And I think often maybe we focus too much on the A word and don't sort of give due respect to sort of the other sort of cultural production that we have, whether it's rodeos or, quilts or any sort of like, I'm really interested in vernacular culture, and we'll get to a lot of that. But I want to sort of start at the beginning. That's something that, the first thing that I made that someone called art, and it made me think, oh, what is art? And that was in 2006, and I was about to leave Los Angeles to move to New York to start my internship at the museum. And I was thinking a lot about walking, and I was thinking a lot about signs, and this is in 2006, if you can take yourself back 9 years. I think there's a lot of really interesting culture jamming that was going on. We still use that term. And thinking about signs and all that sort of stuff. So this is a collaboration with my friend Tyler Menzel, and we wanted to replace some crosswalk signs with this text. So this is, again, this is 5 years after 9/11. I think there's still like a really sort of immediate culture of fear. And also no one really read those signs. Like, A, no one walks in LA, and 2, everyone knows how to use a fucking crosswalk button. So we designed this, and then we put them up around the city. That's in Venice. This is in Sunset Park. And interestingly, so we put 17 up all around the city. Interestingly, I sort of learned from my mistakes there. I didn't take any installation photos, and every photo that I have about a dozen or so, was others who had found it on their own and had taken the photo and had tagged it and posted it to Flickr. I say it's a mistake. Maybe it's not. I think like that also made me really interested in the power of sort of what I guess we call crowdsourcing, but putting things out, not sort of taking credit for them, and seeing how people find them and what they do with them and how they sort of share them. Also, importantly, I put the templates online, and this sort of was a behavior that happened a lot, where I thought it was really important to sort of open source it and make the things available if other people want to do it. And in fact, they did. I got emails from several people who sort of used the template and made their own versions and put them up around their cities. So then I moved to New York, and was really enamored with the city, and was enamored with sort of how how any sort of space was so dense that anything you did in that space had thousands you had an audience of thousands within minutes. And I made this, which was probably what I'm most internet famous for. And I'll play the video and then we'll talk about it. So I should really, another thing that I do with my projects online is I cite prior art, and I think it's really important to cite the prior art on this one. This was very heavily inspired by something that Aaron Bartol did, where he made a very similar thing for televisions. And then at the same time, the Graffiti Research Lab and the anti-advertising agency had done something called light criticism, where they laser cut text and sort of put text. They laser cut text that was sort of critical of advertising, and put them over these billboards. And in my mind, it was just sort of 1 + 1 = 2. And I was surprised no one had done it. And so I did it. So I think sort of in retrospect, looking back on it, I wasn't sort of like trying to make an artwork or whatever. I was sort of like interested in sort of exploring like the sort of design process that had been initiated by these other guys and sort of moving that forward. And I really didn't expect it to sort of take off. But I think that looking back, I think the 3 reasons it did was, one of the reasons is I sort of made this like really sort of simple visual how-to on how to do this. So you just need 2 pieces of foam core, and you cut it like this, and you put it together like that, and ta-da, it's done. And this was striking, at the time that Instructables was really big. I think 8-bit was sort of reaching its zenith. And just sort of struck all the right chords at the right moments. And then also, one of the things that I started with this is sort of writing really ironically about it, or like sort of like presenting it as something that it wasn't. So like the text on the website was that Pixelator is an unauthorized, ongoing video art performance collaboration with New York City Metropolitan Transit Authority, CBS Outdoor, and its selected artists. So the text is sort of like, while the MTA's efforts to create more opportunities for video art exhibition in public spaces is to be commended, selected works remain wholly fixated on commercial goods and media conglomerate events, which is a short-sighted curatorial choice that regrettably ignores the full potential of these promising exhibition spaces. That's sort of how I was writing about it, very sort of tongue-in-cheek, which I think also struck a chord. So that sort of got me sort of, and the attention and like the success of that really got me addicted to sort of doing these things in public spaces for free, sort of these sort of surprises that were hopefully generous to the people who were encountering them. So one day, through all that stuff, I met a frequent collaborator of mine who goes by Poster Child, a street artist in Toronto. And he came to visit, and one day we were walking from the subway, and both sort of had the same idea about this thing, so we immediately set about putting it together. In Astoria, in New York City, there's this leaky pipe. It's drainage from an Amtrak bridge overhead. The runoff covers the entire sidewalk. We call it Astoria Scum River. It's been like this for more than 20 years. It's gross, and it's dangerous. It ices over in the winter. It's well trafficked. People have to walk through it to get to the subway. Poster Child and I were sick of trudging through it, so we decided to do something about it. We found an old workbench someone was throwing away, hauled it home, reconfigured it, reinforced it, built some steps. Bridge. Poster Child engraved a really nice plaque. We dedicated the bridge to the safety and comfort of the pedestrian. Then we waited, hoping people would use it. And they did. Later, we received an email from the office of the local council member, thanking us for the bridge and pledging to fix the problem. That made it on a lot of blogs and one of the papers, and the next day, Amtrak was out working on the problem. And by the end of the month, the leak had been fixed. There was no need for the bridge anymore. So I think it's important to note that we weren't like trying to fix that problem. I think we sort of saw that and found a joke and decided to sort of construct this joke, which then accidentally sort of made the world like incrementally better maybe. one of the things I learned here was the power of naming. Whenever we sort of talked to press, we would, or actually in the plaque we said like this bridge spans Astoria Scum River, sort of like implying that this was called Astoria Scum River by residents, and sure enough, like when media wrote about it, they sort of parroted what we were saying, like that it was such a big problem that it had a name. So that was a fun thing to learn. And actually, when I was putting this together, I totally forgot that also after I didn't need it anymore, I put it on Craigslist to see if anyone would take it. And no one took it, unfortunately, but that's just a fun, slightly used bridge. It's a fun thing to find. So to the point about sort of participation and sort of this like tension between sort of like the curator and creator, I'm sort of creating I'm really interested in like, I think it's really difficult to create participatory works that are as meaningful to the people who participate as sort of the creator, like the person who's organizing. And I've sort of really been like seeking that sweet spot for a long time. And I guess that also sort of results in a meaningful product that is meaningful not just to the people who made it, but to a wider audience that can sort of appreciate its aesthetic value without sort of understanding the entire process. A couple of collaborators of mine and I started doing this project, which I'll show you a video of. Some successes and some failures in that first round, but we got pretty good at sort of figuring out what would work. The two on the right were I found that interactive experiences that work with drunk adults work equally well with sober children, so actually these two were part of an exhibition that Angela organized at a community center in Queens, which I thought were really successful. The middle one obviously is from the video you saw. I did it at the museum down there, and actually the new museum up there. I think like there's something like, I think it hits a sweet spot. I think it hits the sweet spot of sort of a chaos that it's like, I think it's a sweet spot of a managed chaos where it's meaningful for the person contributing and also sort of like brings this sort of larger thing together. So this is something that I did last year and just sort of admitted to with my collaborator, Mike Lacker. So I'm going to like share some recent stuff now that I haven't really talked about much. So these are everywhere in New York City. Have you guys seen these around? Yeah, they're pain in the ass. And so Mike and I realized that actually it'd be really simple to make our own. And we're like, well, what are we going to make them of? So we made them of terrible sequel ideas. So this is Do the Right Thing 2, on the street in Bedford-Stuyvesant where it was originally shot. This is Annie Hall on the famous street on 66th Street, Annie Hall 2. And of course the reaction was what you would hope. please be a prank. And then this guy, who I think nails it on the head. What the fuck? Are people even allowed to live in New York City anymore, or do they just film movies here? Yeah. The template is available online if you'd like to wreak your own havoc. There's a much longer story I'd love to get into, but we can do that at drinks tonight or something later about when we were out putting Godfather 4 up and then discovered someone had actually beat us to it that night. To be continued. I think I'm going to skip over this for time. I'm really interested in the value of the camera and the value of photography. This is we're getting into professional stuff soon, and sort of how photo booths sort of encapsulate values, or how the photos we take encapsulate values, and how sort of specifically photo booths that happen at parties. There's like a photo booth at every goddamn party I go to now. How they sort of like encapsulate a value, and I wanted to sort of like twist that a little bit. So Flux Factory is an art collective in New York City that I'm a community resident of. I've been there for 4.5 years. That's how I met Angela. And every year we have a silent auction benefit. And for the last few years, I've come up with a photo booth idea. And this year, my friend Sean McIntyre and I made something called Fluxfinity. So what we would do is we had this camera positioned up really high. I don't know why I started with this one. And take photos of 1 or 2 or 3 people. And then we would have a photo shop master sort of sitting nearby who would cut out everyone and sort of create a PNG with a blank background. And then Sean, who's on the right, wrote this great software that you press a button and it would like populate to infinity sort of all the people that had taken photos so far. And to me, I thought it really sort of encapsulated like, I thought it was really interesting in sort of speaking to a value in a photo booth. And it's not just me and my friends sort of having a great time. It's like, this is our community together, and it sort of like stretches to the horizon. And also like has that like real cheesy sort of corporate look, which I think is really great. I think it's sort of subverting that like that kind of thing. It's open source. It's on the web, and we really sort of slapped it together. So if that's useful, if it sounds fun, please hack it. Okay, so one more thing before I go to museum stuff. But I need to sort of get consent to. In a lecture about non-consenting audiences. I need consent not to talk about this at all yet. I haven't gone public about this. Is that cool? Can we agree on that? Yeah, cool, thanks. It's not anything bad, it's just we haven't. Actually, it's a great time to talk about this. I think I'm less interested in sort of like being an author of things and more interested in the thing existing and sort of being something that someone discovers. I think like that. That's a way more interesting to encounter the things that I like to do, and this is one of them. So it would sort of diminish the effect of the project if someone found out about the project by reading about it or whatever and then going to it. It's more about sort of encountering it in the wild. So Mike Lacker, who I did the no parking signs with, and I were both really obsessed with phrases that people write on Twitter all the time. I think the classic ones are like, in case you missed it, I see, why am I? And at one point, everyone just kept writing this and then like a link. And we both landed on this waste of characters. I said it once and I'll say it again. I mean, you really must want to emphasize it if you're going to use that much of your 140 characters. This is literally a screen grab from like half an hour ago when I was finishing this up. So James Johnson said it before and we'll say again that the new Yorkshire tea advert makes him so patriotic that he gets a boner and wants to headbutt a Linky. I have no idea what that means, but he says it a lot apparently. Gohan says Vince Staples is a real rapper. Tyler Owen, I can be a Doug. These literally come through, this is 5 in 5 minutes. So it's a really common phrase. So Mike and I were just sort of like, what? And what's interesting is that all these phrases sort of share a commonality in that they're like describing the person, like they're sort of like a statement of identity. So Mike and I thought it would be really funny to put it on a t-shirt and try to sell it to the person who said it. And so we did. We wrote a bot that would mock this up. It would put it in an e-commerce store and then tweet back at the person saying, "You're totally right. We made a shirt for you," or like, "Keep saying it with this shirt." And so people. I'm not helping you carry your buggy if the child in it is old enough to not be, and this person thinks it's really brilliant. Microsoft Query will be the actual death of me. Washing your face on a good makeup day is actually a sin. So the people were really were thrilled by it. Some people even who thought it was spam, which it is, had a lot of respect for it actually. Like most people who called us out for spam actually really, I think, appreciated it. You can read that on your own. And some smart people figured out how to game it. It's kind of blurry, but the one on the left says, marketing bots are a pestilence and an abomination. Middle one says, I suspect that t-shirt thing has a human moderator, but we'll see. This is when they're just sort of messing around with it. And then the one on the right says, this is definitely open to abuse, which is true. But what's interesting actually is that I think people saw a lot of opportunity for abuse, but there's something really interesting about turning something that you say into a t-shirt that's, I think, really indicting. Like if someone says something really racist or homophobic, and then we sort of make a t-shirt, there's something that we argued about, Mike and I argued about. But if you make a t-shirt about that and sort of present it to them, there's something that I think is really, people get freaked out by that actually, because it's they have to wear their word, it's sort of provoking them to wear their words, and they're like, oh, I don't actually mean it that much, or oh yeah, I don't want to be associated publicly with that. So it actually ended up not being a big deal that we had to deal with people doing terrible things on it, because it was such a sort of self-moderating thing, a rare thing. And some people actually even bought them. We had about probably 7 or 8 sales, which sounds good, but actually we made almost 25,000 of them over the course of 7 months, until we were suspended about a month ago. Twitter finally caught on to our game, and it's getting harder and harder as you probably know, to sort of do dynamic stuff on Twitter back to Twitter. But yeah, that was really fun. Let's skip this. Right, so I'm gonna talk about museum stuff now. So that's sort of recent personal work. So I sort of framed this art being a smaller part of culture, and sort of what I do at the museum. So we'll start with the art part. So I'm in charge of commissioning works for our lobby, and I'm really proud of some of the work that we've had there. You probably know Evan Roth, who does a really great series where he constructs sort of a tapestry almost of one animated GIF by sort of loading them in different shapes. So this is a really great piece. The whole space is about 50 feet wide. It's actually hard to photograph because there's no, it's just hard to photograph. This is a piece called Single Stream, which is sort of a documentary piece in a single stream sorting facility near Boston, which is really beautiful. I'm not sure if you know Young Hae Chang Heavy Industries, but they made a really, really lovely piece called American Meshuggah. Scott Gelber is a really fantastic animator who has a series of works sort of exploring this sort of notional world where the computer is becoming sentient. And I think actually, is it CMU where motion capture there's a lot of development in motion capture? Because I think this figure is based on some open source motion capture data I thought it was CMU, maybe it was somewhere else. And then up right now is 2 transmutant leftovers. So I definitely sort of organized and commissioned a lot of work, but I'm actually, and I love doing that, but what I'm really interested in, and what I think I'm sort of really pushing forward at the museum is sort of talking about vernacular culture from this perspective of moving images. So this is a piece that continues to evolve, and it was also in that lobby space. So in 2011, someone named T. Finn posted these 2 animated GIFs to the website Something Awful. This is El Hadji Diouf, who played for the Scotland Rangers. And so in the first loops, you saw that he was being tripped, and he posted this version that you just saw, where sort of the person who's tripping him has been photoshopped out. And he posted this saying, hey, I think there's a lot of potential to this. Let's have a Photoshop thread. What tripped El Hadji Diouf? So what came in was really amazing. There were more than 100 entries remixing him, and all these amazing moments. I'll just let it run through. They're all really fantastic. I think this is my favorite one. Some of them where he fails and some of them where he is okay. And I sort of really like this narrative that kept happening. This is the callback to a 2006 meme with Zidane headbutting someone. Classic pratfalls. And then someone made an 8-bit sprite and distributed it, and all of a sudden you had all these sort of 8-bit versions that were coming out. Again. Really squeezing all the cultural references in there. Oh yeah. And they just got more and more elaborate, as you can see. We're not done yet? Okay. Even playing with suspense, there's this really amazing conversation that was happening. All right, that's it. So I picked 35 of the remix along with the first original ones and organized this exhibition. And so it was. I think that everyone at the museum was mystified at first at what I was doing, and then this happened. Come on. So The Verge came out to do The Verge, the website, came out to do something else, and they saw the wall and like, oh, let me do a piece about this. So we had a conversation. With Jason, in front of the wall, and you do a lot of the digital media stuff, and right? Yes. And you got people at something awful at the website Something Awful saw this and responded to it by putting a GIF of El Hadji Diouf tripping behind us through this conversation. So this was by a user, Hop Wallace, who had the Wizard of Oz piece that you just saw in there, and then a week later he posted this. So these are all the GIFs that were on the wall. This one in the back is one that I didn't include, but everyone on the website was like, I can't believe you didn't include him. So it's sort of like a show of sort of like unity, including him in his it's brilliant. I just think it's like such an amazing, like existential moment to be faced with like everyone hating you so much that they make fun of you in animated GIFs. The exhibit went back up like a couple years later, and of course I had to include those two pieces in the exhibit, which is like it's so fascinating to me, like how that became a part of the conversation and became sort of a part of the story that's being told, and like I don't know, maybe it might even continue evolving. It's such a unique opportunity to really sort of to be of this moment. So that went well, and I got really obsessed with reaction GIFs. And so last year, I posted on Reddit, hey, so I do GIF stuff, and I'm really interested in sort of trying to define a canon of reaction GIFs. Would you post in this thread, if you had to describe what a reaction GIF was to your grandmother, which one would you use, and how would you sort of define it? So I was doing a lot of research in trying to sort of think about reaction GIFs. How do they sort of operate in language? And at first I was like, oh, maybe reaction GIFs are words. We don't have the words for things, so we sort of use these instead. But as I was researching linguistics more, I hit on a different theory, which is this idea that humans have communicated for most of the species' existence, face to face, orally. And when we do that, we have these specific tools. We have our voice, we have gesture, we have intonation, we have rhythm. But in the last few centuries, since the printing press came about, and even more recently, as asynchronous communication, like texting and email, has become a primary way that we communicate, we don't have the same range of tools to communicate. And so what's taking this place is maybe punctuation probably fills in for rhythm, font, and sort of type size maybe fills in for intonation, but there's nothing really for gesture. Maybe emoticons a little bit, but my theory was that reaction GIFs sort of operated in that way. They were sort of, if you used a reaction GIF, you sort of using that to perform for yourself the gesture that you would perform in communication. So if you don't know what a reaction GIF is, we'll get there in a sec. So a bunch of people responded with these really great GIFs. And we put together an exhibition in the same space again. So a reaction GIF is an animated GIF that is posted on a bulletin board or in comment threads or an email, sort of in lieu of text. And they're always humans or animals' bodies in motion. It's really sort of a specific genre. So this person who I only know is That Weird Woodsman defines this clip as sincere pride or support, no gimmick, no attention-grabbing joke or attitude, just you done good. This is, I think, one of the most common of Liz Lemon in 30 Rock. Mike Petroff says this is a trivial expression of congratulations, usually sent when no one else appreciates the joke or post. This is really specific, I think, to bulletin boards. We've probably all seen this around. You want to distance yourself from what's going on, either because a fight has broken out or because things got weird and uncomfortable. And there's a lot of nuance to these, right? I mean, this picture is definitely worth this many words and probably a lot more. This can mean many things. It can mean I value your argument and want to agree with you, but I'm not prepared for the consequences of doing so. Or it can mean when you have to choose between doing something morally good and right and doing something you want to do. And I think, if you use that online, I think that. I think everyone gets that. I think that's a great use of that. And I think probably even undescribable. I wouldn't just describe that as a no, but I think we all get what Oprah's doing there. This is, so I didn't talk about this with We Tripped How to Do, but this is sort of a exhibition technique that as far as I know, I developed where all these are sort of looping independently. It's one seamless projection surface, but most of it's video black. And I've sort of wrestled a lot with how to exhibit animated GIFs. I think screening animated GIFs doesn't make a lot of sense because you're sort of deciding for the viewer when to exit the loop. I think the loop is really important. And so what I've hit upon is sort of exhibiting them like 2D works, giving them their own space and sort of allowing the visitor to sort of choose when to exit the loop. And so it's been really successful. I think there's a lot of we can talk about this later or whatever, but there's a lot of things to think about how do you exhibit sort of internet-born media. And this is a solution that I think works really well and that I really like, and that I worked on further with this exhibit that I organized in August. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. When I first had this idea, I tried to convince myself it was a terrible idea. I really thought it was just too dumb and too obvious, and then the more I thought about it and the more research I did, the more obvious it was it needed to be an exhibit. So this is just some gallery shots. So this exhibit, like a lot of what you've seen that I showed you at the museum, is about vernacular culture. It's about the ways that we're sharing media to communicate, to create communities, and the way that we're making media, not media production as sort of fine art or anything like that, but sort of as a regular part of the way that we have conversations online these days. I think cats are a really important part of that. And I think there's sort of this ongoing sort of cultural question of like, why are cats so popular on the internet? What's the big deal? And it was really, really gratifying to sort of get to go into the details on that. So it starts with a section about how cats, obviously cats existed before the internet, and our interest in cats existed before that. So it was important to frame it like that. So this is everything from like the Edison films to America's Funniest Home Videos, which is a really important precedent. The cornerstone of this very important exhibition, one thing that was really interesting in my research is I turned up something called Meow Chat, which many of you would recognize as lolspeak, which may or may not be the precedent for it. It's actually hard to sort of trace a lineage, but news groups, people were sort of role-playing as their cats and speaking in this really, in this pidgin that's really similar to lolspeak. You probably recognize a lot of that stuff, and then the other end is sort of ends in this idea of the celebrity cat industrial complex, which it really hadn't hit me sort of how much cats on the internet mean sort of celebrity cats until a lot of the media inquiries were like, oh, are you going to be showing Maru, or are you going to be showing Lil Bub? Because to me, like my sort of entrance into internet cats was like Neon Cat and like Lil Cats and stuff like that. So there's actually, I feel like it came at the right moment, because this is like my Marxism showing a little bit. Like, I think there's really like there's a moment right now where capital is taking notice. There's enough critical mass of people being interested in cats, and capital is figuring out a way to sort of get in there and make money off of it. A section about looking at the numbers. Actually, cats don't really amount to much on the internet. In fact, dogs actually get a little more attention on the internet than cats. One interesting stat is YouTube. Less than 1% of YouTube videos are in the animal category, and then I think 16% of that is cats, and like 23% is dogs, something like that. So even in the animal category, it's like we're talking like 0.1% of videos are cats or dogs. Lots of theories about why cats are popular, why they seem popular. There's Jack Shepard, who is at BuzzFeed, coined this term virtual cat park to describe how dog owners have dog parks, but cat owners haven't sort of had a space to be social, and so the internet is like a way or a space for cat owners to commune. A section that sort of like tries to pull out sort of how when we look at cat videos, we're anthropomorphizing them. And one thing that I try to sort of articulate is that the media of cats that we're looking at is not actually is not a representation of the cat. There's sort of these three filters they've gone through. First, the filter of what the human decided, when the human decided to pull out the camera and start filming. Second, like what they decide to edit and keep in, what they decide to keep out. And then sort of third, like the filter of the masses, like what do people favorite and like and watch and all that sort of stuff. So by the time you go through those three filters, what you're seeing doesn't really resemble a cat that much anymore. It resembles sort of what we need out of the cat, which I think is important to sort of to think about. Rounding out. And then I think this was really, I'm really glad I was able to pull this off. I was able to work with Anchal Mena. I don't know if you guys know her. She's really a great voice in talking about how the internet that you and I know is really only one small internet. And there's a lot of other people on the internet who have, that sort of our cultures online are culturally situated. So she was able to round up more than a dozen researchers all over the world to basically ask them, what animal is popular on your internet, to see if cats were a global phenomenon or if they weren't. And it turns out that, as you might suspect, actually, the animals that people know are more familiar with in their own countries end up on the internet more. For example, llamas and goats are really big in South America. There's a really great hyenas in Kenya. Anyway, it's really, really awesome, and I think there's gonna be some really great research that ends up we're actually still adding to this map, and I think there's going to be some great stuff that comes out after that. So I will end there. Thanks a lot. I hope we can have questions, and thanks for coming out.